Well, good day, everybody, and thanks for joining today's webinar, where we'll be discussing best practices and trends amongst America's leading law firms. And thanks again to our host, Good to Be Social, for hosting us here today. Before we get started, we'd like to be able to introduce everybody who's going to be speaking and sharing their wisdom today. Guy Alvarez, CEO and founder of Good to Be Social. Guy has been advising Fortune 100 companies and AM law firms on all aspects of digital marketing, including social media training, search engine optimization, content marketing, measurement and analytics, and the development of thought leadership through platforms and microsites. Also joining us today is Josh Epstein, Director of Communications at DLA Piper here in the U.S., where he oversees all aspects of the firm's external and internal communication strategy and platforms. Eric Packel, primarily focusing on trial work involving labor and employment law. Most recently, he has developed a significant amount of his practice to representing employers in collective actions brought pursuant to the Fair Labor Standards Act, a topic which he also has written extensively and lectured on. So thanks for joining us, Eric. And last, of course, but not least, Jay Plum, Senior Manager of Content Marketing Communications at Morrison Foerster, where he leads the firm's social media and marketing communication functions, developing campaigns that bring visibility to the firm, its practices, and its cultures. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Well, you know what, guys, today we're really, oh, yes, go ahead.
Go ahead, sorry.
Oh, no worries. Well, guys, we're here to really dive deep and get into some social media strategy. I think one thing that a lot of law firms really want to know is, how big is this, right? When we think about the sharing and of course, driven by the major social networks and Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, LinkedIn, and of course, with other networks picking up the slack, just what goes on in the run of the day. And I think that first Facebook stat really says a lot, with 8 billion average video views, with 350 million photos just per day. And on Twitter, with 6,000 tweets sent every second, it really is staggering the amount of information that does get generated and can be leveraged by brands and, of course, law firms. The one thing that we do see as a trend is that this is a visual revolution. We do know that visuals are just much easier processed by the brain, and we're also seeing that full-color visuals increase people's willingness to read a piece of content by 80%. Now, one of the neat stats that I saw about this was having relevant images paired with information and its ability to increase that information retention. 65% versus 10% when no image, up to 3 days later. Some pretty staggering trends there when we think about just the visual nature of the social space. We're also seeing that, social is branching out. When it first started, it was those one or two people, banging away, and they were the ones creating and managing and running these social accounts on behalf of brands. And now we're starting to see, it does take an army. We need multiple departments involved, and you might have that one employee who has their own blog on the weekend, or might run their own video channel. These are great people to help contribute to your overall social strategy and help create some of this great thought leadership content. Another point about employees and social is that whole employee advocacy play. Get them to help distribute your great social information. We'll talk more about that later. And third trend, really the use of listening. I've heard this for years with the clients that I've helped out is, hey, we started listening to our own brand, but there's just not much being said. How do we look at social then? To them, I always try to point out to the competitor conversations. Take a look at competitors that are doing things in social and try to learn from them, or even broadening out to the industry as a whole. Think about market research and just listening to the power of your social community to find things like trends, influencers, topics that you could then write about, and make sure you're plugged into your industry so that the information that you're creating can also help you write better email copy for campaigns, even help tweak your website copy by using the language that your community already uses to speak about your industry or services that you do provide. For channel optimization, one company I thought who did this really well was Caterpillar. Being able to first listen to see where their brands and products were being mentioned, and then formalizing strategies for each of the networks that they felt would now value the brand from that listening. So it really does allow you to, no reason to boil the ocean and participate in every social network, do a little bit of listening, and then optimize the channels that you are going to be engaging in by learning from those communities on what that community would actually like to know from a social perspective. Well, without further ado, I'd like to be able to bring Guy into the conversation, CEO of Good to Be Social. Guy, tell me a little bit about your social law firm index and its findings.
Sure, Corey. So the Social Law Firm Index is a study of the AMLA 100 law firms and their use and participation in social media. This is the third year that we've done the index. We started with the AMLA 50, and then for the last 2 years, we focused on the AMLA 100. We also last year did a Social Law Firm Index UK, where we measure the top 100 UK firms in terms of how they were using social media. This year, we have several findings. We tweaked the methodology slightly to reflect some of the new platforms that are out there, but also to reflect some trends within the legal industry, primarily the focus on content marketing and on developing thought leadership platform, thought leadership content. And that is why this year, we actually have a specific ranking for thought leadership, which actually Eric's firm won as the top thought leadership law firm in terms of creating thought leadership content. But some of the findings that we have and that we found are primarily focused on a couple of different things. First, size doesn't matter. Small firms can outperform their competition. And they can get higher engagement if they focus on a couple of different things. First of all, frequent updates. Those firms that are updating their content, creating content on a consistent basis, they tend to get better engagement because their audience tends to expect that content, they look for it, and they rely on it. So those firms that are frequently and consistently updating content definitely get better engagement. The type of content is also very important. The firms that are succeeding are those firms that are creating client-centric content, not content about themselves. So a lot of firms still use social media as a bullhorn. They use it as just another channel of distribution where they tweet out or post their firm news or first firm announcements. But what we found is that that is not very a good practice from an engagement perspective. Really what you've got to look at is what do your clients really care about? What is the content that they're looking for? What kind of content will they find valuable and educational? And in those cases, we find a much higher level of engagement. Visuals are also becoming extremely important. There's been many studies done in the last couple of years that actually indicate that using visuals leads to 80% higher engagement than just pure text. So more and more firms that are successful are using visuals, whether it's video, whether it's infographics, or just plain images that add to that level of engagement and add to that level of interest. Another thing we're seeing is firms that are actively curating third-party content. So being a thought leader, it's not just about creating your own content, but also taking an active role in finding and curating other people's content and adding your own 2 cents or adding your opinion or analysis on that content. And the firms that are really succeeding are doing this and playing a very active role in basically informing their audience of everything that's going on within a particular area of law or within a particular industry. Hashtags is another thing that we're looking at, and the successful firms are using hashtags so that their audience can discover their content. We see many firms that we looked at that are tweeting, but they're not using hashtags. And the problem with that is that people, their intended audience, are not finding their content. So using hashtags effectively is definitely something that we found successful law firms are doing. And then last but not least, and we'll talk about this a little bit later on, is training everyone at the firm on how to participate on social media. Those firms that are doing that are extending their reach, and they're getting everyone at the firm engaged and participating in sharing the firm's social media content. Another finding, and this is not surprising, is we see that LinkedIn continues to be the social network of choice. Lawyers feel comfortable on LinkedIn, pretty much 100% participation by the AmLaw 100 on LinkedIn. And while most firms are participating on LinkedIn, a lot of them are not properly leveraging their attorneys. What we mean by that, and what we see, is LinkedIn groups are probably one of the most important areas of LinkedIn. But as we all know, companies or law firms can't actually participate in groups. Only attorneys can, or only individuals can. So those firms that are not leveraging their attorneys, not training them, not giving them the tools to enable to post content and participate in LinkedIn groups, they're really missing a huge opportunity and really missing an ability to take advantage of that great content that they're creating. Again, many firms on LinkedIn are still using it as just another channel for promoting themselves, and we find that not to be very engaging. And then we see very few firms taking advantage of LinkedIn showcase pages, the new feature that LinkedIn released that is really enabling a lot of firms to showcase beyond their firm, maybe practice areas or practice groups or industry groups or regional offices. We also find that most firms are still struggling to measure the return on investment of their social media efforts. And those few that are measuring are not necessarily linking the results with their overall business objectives and not effectively gleaning actionable data. So we're seeing a lot of firms participating in social, very few actually measuring, and even amongst those that are measuring, maybe not necessarily connecting the dots and figuring out how their participation in social actually results in increased and enhanced business goals and business objectives. And then last but not least is video. We're seeing video becoming more and more important as a content type. We're seeing more firms using video, and the quality and the effectiveness is varying, right? We see some firms that are using iPhones and other inexpensive tools to do video, but they're still doing it in a good way. While at the same time, we see firms that are spending a lot of money in producing high polished videos, but they're not properly promoted, they're not properly tagged, so they're still struggling to figure out the right balance with video and how to effectively use that. So as we go into the Social Law Firm Index, one of the first things we looked at again is content and thought leadership. And when we think about content and thought leadership, there's a couple of best practices that we see. First of all, every social media campaign needs a content strategy. You can't have an effective social media campaign without a content strategy. And in order to create this content strategy, you need to identify your target personas, who your target audience is, and what they actually care about, what keeps them up at night, what opportunities they're looking for, what problems or issues they're dealing with. And this allows a firm to start and create an editorial calendar. An editorial calendar allows a firm to plan over the long term what kind of content they're going to be creating, how their content is going to address their target personas and what they care about, and to be able to do it in a systematic way so that it can be consistent and they have a strategy to post across multiple platforms. We also look for firms that are looking to have a creative mix of content, not just blog posts, but videos, infographics, surveys, white papers, webinars, all of these things. This creative mix is what really makes firms stand out. And those firms that are doing this are really starting to succeed. We believe in a process called COPE, create once, publish everywhere. So for every blog post that you create or every video, you should have the ability to multi-purpose and reuse that content in a way that you can leverage and enhance your reach and your engagement. When it also comes to content and thought leadership, identifying influencers and building strategic relationships are key. It's not just finding, people that are interested in your content, but also finding people that are other thought leaders and building on them and developing strategic relationships so that you can reach their target audience and they can reach yours. And then, as I already mentioned before, content curation is key. A true thought leader is not just someone that creates content. A true thought leader is someone that can also look at other people's content that's published out there, and basically collect it, curate it, filter it, and then present it back to their audience in a way that distills and presents an analysis or a point of view. Eric, why don't you talk a little bit now about the Ruby files and what you guys have done at Polsinelli?
Sure, I'd be happy to. And let me begin by saying I appreciate Good to Be Social's recognition of what we've done, and we've spent a lot of time trying to develop our own strategy. You mentioned a few things, Guy, on the last slide that we really tried to incorporate with the bullets, and I think that's great advice. There's three things that I would point to that we really focused on that you mentioned that I think can't be overlooked. And one thing you mentioned was content strategy, and it seems to be such a simple concept, but it's so important. And here's what I mean by that. So, for example, I do employment law, I do trade secret law. We know those laws. We know the FMLA, we know the ADA, we know Uniform Trade Secret Act. And what a lot of law firms, I think their initial reaction is, we need to do a blog, we need to do a webinar, we need to do an e-blast about the FMLA or about the ADA. And there's not a lot of thought in that. Well, a lot of law firms are doing that. So the content strategy, I think, is a real important point. How are we going to convey that content? Because most employment lawyers are going to know those laws, as an example, and they'll be able to present on that law, on the FMLA, the ADA, whatever. So how are we going to be different? That's one thing. You mentioned client-centric. I think that's so important. That was a part of our strategy in developing the Ruby files. So what we did, a phrase that I would use is think, but don't overthink it. And what I mean by that is take the time to sit back and analyze, okay, what sort of strategy do we want to use to try to present this content information, okay? And then with the client-centric, what do our clients want to know? How can we convey this to our clients and make us different than everybody else? And so that's what we tried to do. So with the Ruby files, really it was through strategizing, talking about it, thinking about how can we convey this where it's different than other people are doing, other firms are doing. So we came up with a fictional employee, and her name was Ruby. So throughout the course of the year, Ruby worked in various industries, and we really looked at Ruby and employment concepts through the lens of the employer, through our client's lens. So, for example, the client, an HR person doesn't go to work and all of a sudden have somebody come in and say, today you're going to deal with FMLA, or today you're going to deal with the ADA, or maybe for this week you're just going to deal with that. That's not reality. What happens is they go to work and somebody may come in and mention a complaint, and then 10 minutes later maybe somebody else comes in and says, I have an employee who needs an accommodation under the ADA. So that's how we tried to look at it. We had Ruby work in these different sectors, and we also had audio clips. You mentioned visuals and things like that. That was one thing that we incorporated that broke up our program. So, for example, we would talk about, maybe the job description that Ruby was operating under, and then maybe we would talk about a situation Ruby had with her supervisor. And then we would literally listen to an audio clip, a conversation between Ruby and her supervisor, or Ruby and one of her best friends, And then after that, we would say, okay, so what did we hear in that telephone conversation? What issues should we be spotting there? And then after we would deal with those issues, we'd go on, and maybe something else would come up. In one of these sessions, Ruby worked for a company, and she decided she was going to leave. And as she's leaving, we heard an audio clip between her and her supervisor at the time where she thanked the supervisor for the job and told him how much she learned, and she would be able to incorporate that in her new position where she was going to work after that. So, of course, that raises your antenna. Well, wait a minute. You know, we've told you about trade secrets, and you know you can't take those trade secrets. So, and the one that you're looking at here, we talk about the case of the disappearing secrets in an independent contractor. That's what that dealt with. We also tried to have interesting topics. And so it was kind of like a book on tape, but it actually incorporated legal concepts as well. And we found that our clients really enjoyed it. They enjoyed the soap opera aspect of it, but they also, I think, really enjoyed a webinar and a program that was designed for them. In other words, they could relate not only to Ruby, but they could relate to the supervisors. And it was sort of like a day in the life of somebody who works at one of our clients. And then the other thing that we did, Guy, is Ruby worked in 3 different industries. So she worked in one for a while and she quit, and we dealt with constructive discharge. And then after that, she was terminated from another job, and then she went to work in the 3rd industry. So we were able to deal with the various industries, again, client-centric. We focused on industries in which our clients work and operate. And that was, we received great reviews from doing that. So I would wrap that up by saying, again, you know, it's like if I try a case, then before trial, you want to sit down and say, okay, now how can I win and what do I need to prove here? Really, before you jump in to whatever you're going to do, sit back and think, how can we convey this content in a way that our clients will want to hear it, in a way that's most beneficial to our clients, and then come up with some unique way to convey that. And there's various ways to do that. The one we chose was a fictional employee. We're right now going through the process of deciding what we're going to do next year, but it will be a similar concept with a common thread designed to target our clients and give them the best value that we can give them. And really, I mean it, Guy, incorporating some of those bullets that you talked about in the previous slide.
That's fascinating, Eric. Thank you so much for sharing that. And that is such a great campaign. And clearly, you got a significant amount of engagement from your audience through doing that. So thank you for sharing that with us. Let's next turn to best practices around channel optimization. And here we want to talk about a couple of the different channels and some of the best practices for each of the channels. So let's start with LinkedIn, obviously the platform that most law firms and lawyers feel comfortable with. And from my perspective, LinkedIn really has three very important keys. First of all, I think LinkedIn is the perfect platform to demonstrate your thought leadership. And I think lawyers and law firms can achieve this, but specifically lawyers, by actively participating in LinkedIn groups. Now, there's thousands and thousands of LinkedIn groups out there, but many of them are worthless. I would say probably only about 30% of LinkedIn groups actually have some value. So the key is to find those groups, not where other lawyers are, but where your target audience is, and then to actively participate and demonstrate your thought leadership by sharing your content, sharing your knowledge, and engaging in conversations. LinkedIn is also a fabulous platform to strategically build your network. If you're trying to develop relationships or you're trying to get new clients, LinkedIn gives you the capability to build those networks, to build those relationships in a way that was never possible before. So I think there's huge value in LinkedIn from that perspective. And then, as I just said before, making the proper use of groups is, I think, extremely important, and really it's value that a lot of people don't actually offer. When we talk about Twitter, I think Twitter gives you the ability to discover influencers. It gives you an ability to broaden your reach beyond anything else that's out there. If you're properly tagging your content, if you're using hashtags effectively, you can really expand your reach in a way that was never before possible. A couple of things that maybe people don't know that much about is Twitter is a great way to get competitive and industry intelligence. If you're trying to get business from a specific company or trying to find out what your competitors are up to, Twitter is a great platform to actually listen in and see what's going on and get an idea of what your target audience or your competitors are really doing and identify gaps and opportunities. And then last but not least, Twitter is the perfect platform to connect with reporters and journalists. I know many journalists, both inside the legal media and traditional media, where they use Twitter as a way to find experts and to get people that can comment on stories and develop relationships. Facebook also is a different type of platform from my perspective. I see a lot of law firms not quite sure figuring out how to use Facebook. A lot of them are publishing thought leadership content, which is not necessarily, from my perspective, the best use of Facebook. I think Facebook is served best by really using it to present the culture of the firm. Facebook is a great recruiting tool. It is a great tool to connect and keep in touch with alumni. And it's a great way to show the world the firm's community involvement. If you're involved in causes or if you're having events, or just to show what it is a day in the life of working at the firm, that, from my perspective, is really the value of Facebook when it comes to the legal industry. And of course, actively using video and photos and ways that show what your firm is all about. That, to me, is really where the value is when it comes to Facebook. Let me now turn this over to Josh. Josh, your firm, DLA Piper, was one of the top ranked, if not the top ranked, in our index when it came to LinkedIn. Tell us a little bit about how DLA is using LinkedIn and what you guys have found so far.
Thanks, Guy. Well, LinkedIn, it's really the perfect platform to show what our overall strategy for content is. We wanted to demonstrate our lawyers' knowledge. We want it to be useful, actionable, accessible, and we want to use it to engage with our clients, with prospects, lawyers, and even with ourselves in the firm. And it's obviously not the be-all and end-all, but we are finding that it is, and as you know, it's increasingly where people are going, where general counsel are going, where our clients are going, where people are going to look at news. And for us, the balance is, because we're such a big firm and we represent so many different clients in industries and different regions, it's finding that balance between what you described of aggregating news and putting out third-party content and using our own original content, and which can sometimes be a challenge, but we also find that there are so many things out there and we have such a high level of engagement, which is increasing all the time, it's easy to find our spots. And there are different products within LinkedIn. One that we use is LinkedIn Elevate, which is allows us to curate content on a daily basis, send it out to our lawyers, and then they can choose what they want to use to send out to their networks. That really helps to drive engagement. And we're also, as you mentioned earlier, using focus pages. We have 11, I think, so far. And so that's really helped to enhance the brand and increase our network as well.
And you want to talk a little bit about, how you guys feel your clients and in-house counsel are using LinkedIn. I hear a lot from lawyers, especially when they're participating on LinkedIn groups. Well, I don't never see in-house counsel post, so that they must not be on there. What has been your experience with regards to that?
Well, they are on there, and because we know, because we're hearing from them, and when you really hear is when you have lawyers who are engaging for the first time or who have had a LinkedIn profile page, but they do nothing with it. And we work with them to educate them on optimizing it and how they should be using it. They get involved in sharing content on a regular basis. And then suddenly they're hearing from a lot of people in their network. They're hearing from clients. They're hearing from prospective clients. They're hearing from former colleagues who have gone in-house. And it's an opportunity to create a dialogue. So even if they're not necessarily reading every word of the alert or the content that we post, it's an excuse to get in touch, and it's a good reason for them to create that dialogue and continue that conversation. They see that we're thinking about the issues that they care about, and then we start to engage with them that way. So they're not looking to us to break news, obviously, and that's something that takes some education internally as well. But they are looking for us to interpret it, and also it serves a purpose with our current clients because they like to see that we're on top of the things that they're thinking about.
That's a great point. That's a great point. All right, let's turn now to Twitter, and I'll bring in Jay. Jay, your firm, Morris & Foster, was amongst the leaders when it came to the use of Twitter. Talk to us a little bit about how you guys are using Twitter and what kind of value you've gotten out of it so far.
Well, we're using Twitter really to build and extend our relationships, and these are relationships with our clients, as you were talking about, also with recruits, whether they're lateral recruits or campus recruits, also bloggers and other influencers like reporters and journalists. I think of all the social media channels that we use, Twitter is the most immediate, and the upside to that is it's a very effective way to engage and to engage your followers and to reach them. The downside is that because it's so immediate, you need to, in order to maximize Twitter's potential, you really need to make sure that you're doing frequent content, timely content, and also you're having engaging messages. So I thought I'd share just a few examples of some things that we've used to sort of optimize that platform at the firm. And the first example here is repurposing an infographic that was produced by one of the partners in our technology transaction practice. And here a member of our content marketing team worked with the partner to develop a visual guide to social media best practices for businesses. And we took the bold images and the provocative language from the original infographic, and we brought that into the Twitter campaign, just both to maintain some consistency in visual branding and also to grab the attention of our followers. And the result was a campaign that performed above benchmark for us. It gained some media attention, and to your other question there, Guy, it led to some business for the firm. That the partner did get some business out of the campaign. The second example that I'd point to is a campaign we did around National Cybersecurity Awareness Month. And these are just some examples here of the month-long campaign that we used to promote our thought leadership on privacy and cybersecurity matters. We worked with the National Cybersecurity Alliance in developing this campaign and developed a hashtag strategy so we could create a dialogue and we also could cross-promote the content. The third example here is an example of how you can use listicles on Twitter. So in this example, we repurposed content from one of the chestnuts of legal marketing at law firms, the client alert. And like most client alerts, there's lots of great content there, but there was just too much to digest in one sitting. So to make it more snackable, we created a listicle. And we sort of turned it into a top 10 list and did sort of your Letterman-style countdown. And finally, I want to use an example of something that some of our associates in San Francisco and New York have worked on. They've created a Twitter handle focused on impact investing. And here's, I think, a really nice example of how lawyers can really be a vital part of the Twitter strategy. They maintain this handle. They're retweeting content, and they're also repurposing content and some original tweets from the firm. And it's really been successful in establishing the firm as a leader in this emerging impact investing space.
Thanks, Jay. So one of the questions I often get from law firms and lawyers is, how many Twitter accounts should a law firm have? Should they have a Twitter account, for every practice group? Should I have a Twitter account for every region? How do you guys decide, how many Twitter accounts to maintain, and what's your strategy associated with that?
I think it depends on each firm, and it depends on what your marketing strategy. I think instead of quantity, I'd really focus on quality. That it's, again, if you're really going to be successful on Twitter, you should make sure that you have a handle or that you're having accounts that have frequent and timely content. And so it's about making sure that you can maintain that frequency to really succeed on Twitter.
Thank you, Jay. That's fascinating. All right, let's turn now to social media advocacy or employee advocacy, as it's more commonly known in internet social media world. And the example I like to give here is the example of the bag of marbles. If you envision your law firm or your company as a bag and each lawyer as a marble, and if you take that bag of marbles and place it on a table or on a surface, there's only so much of that surface that you're going to be covering. However, if you take all the marbles out and spread them across a table, obviously the reach and the potential for engagement is significantly higher. So I guess the analogy here is, the more you can get your employees and your attorneys across the firm to participate in sharing the content that the firm is creating, to connect with their own social networks and to share that content, probably the better off the firm is going to be. And we've seen a lot of examples of that, where firms and companies that have actively gotten their employees involved, they're starting to see significant benefits, much more so than just doing it as a corporate or as a legal entity on their own. So with that being said, and here are a couple of examples of some tools that are out there to enable attorneys and employees to share. But let me turn first to Eric. Attorneys participating on social media is difficult, and I'm sure Josh and Jay will talk a little bit about, the challenges that they face in getting attorneys to actively participate. I think a lot of the time the challenge is that they don't quite understand not just how to do it, but why. Why should they be participating on social media? What's in it for them? So Eric, as a practicing attorney, tell us a little bit about, why you decided to actively participate in social media, perhaps some of the benefits and things that you've gotten out of your participation. And then lastly, what advice would you give to marketing professionals at law firms that might help them convince their lawyers that social media is worth it, and it's a platform and it's something that everyone should be doing, at least at some level?
Sure, and this may be sort of stream of consciousness, but you've raised a lot of great questions. I'll go back to your bag of marbles, that example. So I'm a client, I'm a company, and I have a legal issue. I need to choose a marble. Well, if I don't have a marble on the table or in the bag, there's no chance I'm going to get picked. They're going to pick a marble. So I want to make sure that I've got, and I don't mean to be cheesy, but I've got the shiniest, brightest, best-looking marble among the 100 marbles on the table, and it's going to grab their attention. So I would say this, Guy. I mean, it's a great point that you make about, a great analogy with a bag of marbles and expand your law firm's reach. But here's the other thing. As a practicing lawyer, we have a lot of lawyers at my firm. It's competitive. And there used to be a day when, not too long ago, clients would pick who they thought was the best lawyer. But now we're not just in the law business. It's a business. It's not just law. It's a competitive business. And I really don't want to convey that I'm competing with the people down the hall from me. But at the same time, you want to make sure that you get your name out there, that people know who you are. So as far as the benefits, one of the best benefits really is you get clients. And so I would say persuasion. And even if you use statistics, if you talk to lawyers in the firm that you're dealing with and you say, okay, who do you consider to be not the best lawyers? I mean, that's a great question, but who do you consider to be the most successful lawyers in your firm? It's probably going to be lawyers who are very good at their skill, but also have business of their own. So how did they get that business? It's through word of mouth. It's through publicity. It's getting your name out there, becoming known as an expert in a certain area of law. And so, again, in the old days, it was people really chose who they thought was the best lawyer. But there's so many lawyers. It's so competitive. You could be the best lawyer in the world, but if you don't have a client or a case to work on, so what? So that would be, my motivation when I talk to partners of mine, associates who I work with. We're no longer just lawyers. It's a business. You should have a business plan. You should plan how you're going to try to become better known in the area in which you practice. I try to spend 10 to 15, 20% of my week figuring out how can I reach out to my clients, how can I give my clients value, how can I give my clients some benefit that they're not paying for, because again, it gets back to the competitive legal world that we're living in now. So I talk to them about spending that time, and you have the time. That's another point. Lawyers like to think we're the most busy people in the world. We're not. We're busy. We're no busier than you, Guy. We're no busier than Josh or Jay. We're all working the same hours, but we like to think we're busier. We're not. So don't try to tell me, if I'm talking to that you're too busy, because there's a lot of other people that are busy too. It benefits you and it benefits the firm. But if you want to get ahead in a law firm, you need to become better known through the publicity, and you need to expand your individual reach. So when somebody has a misappropriation of trade secret case, I want them to think of Eric Peckel, and they think, I saw a blog that he put up. I've seen Eric comment on articles on LinkedIn. I've listened to Eric's webinar, whatever it is. So the advice I would give them is, this is a way for you to get ahead in your profession, in your chosen career. This is a way for clients to be able to find you easier, and that's going to translate to you being a more successful lawyer and business person. And you're not just in the law profession. You're a business person. You need to think in both of those terms. You're a lawyer and you have a business of your own.
Great, Eric. Thank you for that. And I completely agree. I especially agree with what you say that, part of what your job is to, on a daily basis, try to provide value to your clients and to keep in touch with your clients. And what better way to do that than through social media, right? Because in the old days, what you had to do was, pick up the phone or send an email but with social media, you can just be participating and sharing on a daily basis and in a very simple way, keep your clients abreast of developments and things that are going on that have an impact on their business. So I think that's a great point. Let me ask Josh and Jay, how do you guys encourage your attorneys to participate? How challenging is it for you? I'm sure there's some that are willingly participating and others that just won't. So how do you do it, and what have you found to be successful, and what would be your advice to other legal marketers that face similar challenges?
Well, for us at DLA Piper, we try to make it as easy for them as possible. And we, luckily, good and bad, we have enough lawyers that we always have a high level of engagement. And we do regular training sessions. We commute success that other lawyers have to them on a regular basis. And we just try to demystify it for them. Not that there's really much to it, but for some, it's just, yeah, I don't want to go to the trouble of putting a new photo up. I don't want to optimize my profile. But when they see how easy it is, then they become engaged. When they see the content that we're curating for them, that they can then push out to their networks, and how easy it is for them to pick and choose, and the engagement that others have had as a result of doing that, then that builds enthusiasm. And that then snowballs, and we've been seeing that to the point where we have hundreds of lawyers who are now involved, when before we had much less, and it was not as strategic.
I would echo that. I think it's about educating and providing training so people have a certain comfort level with it, and also just making it as easy as possible for lawyers, to share and to really sort of engage with their networks on social media.
Guys, that's great. All right, let's move on to the last part of the presentation and talk a little bit about tools. What tools are out there to manage your social media, to monitor your social media, to help you measure your impact on social media. Corey, perhaps you can help us out here from your perspective. Obviously, you work for Sprinklr, but you have a pretty good sense of the tools that are out there. Obviously, there's big firms, there's small firms. If I'm trying to figure out what tools I should use, what things should I be looking for, give us a little bit of help here in trying to figure this out.
Well, thanks for bringing me on, guys. It's a great question, and not really the easiest one to answer. The big questions for the end, I guess. I've always sort of seen social as a bit of a pyramid, right? And you really want to understand what you want to get out of the space and how you want to interact and use social media. So at the top of the pyramid, I always see almost both kinds of what I call channels. There's on-channel and off-channel. Of course, on-channel is anything that you produce as a law firm, right? That's publishing it to your Twitter, your Facebook, your Instagram. But then there's also off-channel. It's listening to the broader conversations that's happening on these networks, and of course expanding into blogs and forums and other news sites, chat rooms where possible, and really getting that full swath of listening data. And then it's really understanding kind of what media types you want to interact with. Am I looking at just my own media, what I own as a brand, or am I looking to get into social advertising and look at the paid component? And then am I looking for that earned media? Those are conversations that are happening about you that might not just live on, your owned channels. So getting an idea of sort of what you want to get out of it, whether it is that just listening to your own social accounts, being able to measure engagement, those are all components that I think you really have to think about before you pick a tool. And then when it came back to some of our points earlier, being able to match it back to strategy. Why do I want to listen or engage? Is it more of a thought leadership component I want to go to? Is it being able to do more of a customer service component and more help a community, for instance, by providing valuable information that we know law firms have in spades? Of course, we would all love some billable hours around that, but still being able to provide that help in the space can also help, once again, drive awareness, thought leadership, and make sure that when people do have that need for some legal advice, hey, they think of your law firm first. So, of course, you could see a myriad of tools there. A lot of it does come back to budget, but many of them are free as well. So you could very easily start small, and then as your strategy evolves and garners more interest in the organization and expands, then those budgets are there to look at more, tools that just have more flexibility for your needs.
Thank you, Corey. That's very helpful. Let's just finish up with a little bit about social media measurement, because this is a question that we get all the time. How do I go about measuring my impact on social media? And we like to look at 5 categories: exposure, influence, engagement, conversions or actions, and then obviously sales. And when it comes to law firms, it should be the same way. So at the top of the funnel, you're looking at exposure. How many visits are you getting to your blog or your website? How many followers? How many fans? Then you get into influence. What's your share of voice? What's the sentiment? How people are feeling about what you're posting online? Are you getting a level of influencer? Engagement, which to me is probably the most important. Are people engaged? Are they retweeting? Are they sharing? Are they commenting on your content? Conversion, right? We're not just doing it for the sake of doing it. We're doing it because we want to reap actual, real business benefits. So are we actually getting people to sign up for our webinars? Are there getting people to fill out our lead generation forms? Are they inviting us to do pitches or RFPs and proposals? And then last but not least, probably the way most senior leadership will measure your success is it actually leading to sales? Are we getting new clients as a result of all this work? And so that is sort of the way that we look at how to measure the success and the ability of your social media. Let's finish off with each of you. If I could ask each of you maybe for a closing statement, if you will. Again, our audience is legal marketers at small and large law firms all over the world. Someone who's just starting out on social media or has been given the role of saying, okay, you're going to lead our social media strategy. What would be your one word of advice for them? Let's start out with Jay. Jay, what would be your one thing that you would advise them to do if they were just getting started?
Develop and maintain an editorial calendar. It's really going to help you, maximize and optimize your performance in each of the channels, and to make sure that you have timely and frequent communications.
Great. That is a great word of advice, and it does kind of help you organize everything and make sure you're consistent with your posting. Josh, what about you?
I would say it's to be strategic, and obviously you want to be organized, have an editorial calendar, and that can be a challenge, but it's immensely useful when you do. But you want to be strategic and recognize that you're not a news outlet. However, you do want to bring news that your clients, potential clients, your contacts can use and is impactful to them. So you don't want to throw everything out there. You want to throw the things that matter out there.
I think that's great advice. And, a lot of times people ask me, how do they get started? You don't have to be on every channel. You can start with one, do it really well, and then go on to the next one. So I think that's excellent advice. Eric, what advice do you have?
Well, as a lawyer, my first advice is to partner with marketing, with the people that are responsible for the social media. But then I would say partner with your clients. Be a business partner with your client. I go back to it being a business. Spend time with your clients. Say, what do you want? What do you want to know? How can I provide more benefit to you? What media can I use? What channel can I use? What do you want to know more about? And you accomplish 2 things that way. You find out the best way to provide them this information, number 1. Number 2, it gives you an excuse to spend more time with your client and develop more of that business relationship and partnership with your client.
That is excellent advice, and I wish more lawyers thought like you. I really think that's phenomenal advice. Corey, from your perspective, coming from outside the industry, I'm sorry, go ahead, Eric.
No, I was just going to say it takes a while. We're not born this way. It takes a while, so be patient with them.
Yeah, absolutely. Corey?
The one thing that I would say, and geez, guys, thanks again for inviting me here. It's been great to learn from leaders like yourselves. Is don't think about, if you're a marketer, you're communications, you're a PR person in this industry, think outside of your industry. Learn from peers that are beyond just your specific industry. I've heard it for, the over 8 years I've been in social media is people always want to know, well, I need to see more B2B examples, or I need to see more examples from my industry. The great thing about social is that so many of these strategies, so many of these tactics are cross B2B, B2C, and cross industries. So definitely learn from more than just your industry. I think you'll be surprised at how many of the success stories that are out there can easily apply back into the legal industry itself.
Thank you, Corey. Okay, well, with that, we wrap up our session. I hope that everyone found this to be informative and valuable. I certainly did. And again, I want to thank our presenters, Corey, Eric, Jay, and Josh. Thank you so much for your time. We really do appreciate it. If you want to find out more information about the Social Law Firm Index or about social media in general, I invite all of you to visit us at goodtobesocial.com. Also follow us at goodtobesocial on Twitter. And by all means, sign up for our newsletter. We're pumping out great content on a weekly basis that I think would be very valuable for everyone. Thank you, everyone, again. We really appreciate it. And until next time, thank you very much.